Hi, I'm Paul Friedman. I'm the founder of the Marriage Foundation. We've got an interesting topic for you now. Hopefully you're a subscriber, so you're learning a lot about marriage. This topic is there anything you can do when your wife no longer wants intimacy? This is a code word for sex, by the way. And everyone likes to use the word intimacy, but intimacy is completely different from sex. And look, first of all, there's not something wrong with you. There's not something wrong with your wife. Again, you gotta become a subscriber and listen to these videos. Start learning about marriage. And we have lost the proper perspective on nearly everything in our world. And I'm not blaming anybody. Don't misunderstand me. There's no big conspiracy. It's just the way the world is. It twists things. I can remember when I was a kid, I was in 9th grade, and the teacher was talking about slavery. I went to a school that was predominantly black. It was like 75% black. I was raised in poverty. My parents were immigrants. And so that was the school that I went to. And at that time, if you were black, you were poor. And that's just the way it was. And so the teacher was talking about, and I'm using this just to illustrate how messed up things are in this world in terms of understanding, communication. And the teacher was a decent teacher. And I don't remember if it was a he or she, but they said, now remember, there were also good slaveholders. And I went, what? I said, by definition, there's no such thing as a good slaveholder. If you hold a slave, you're not a good person. Sorry, folks, maybe it was acceptable culturally in those days, and they thought they were good, but you kept a human being as a slave. And I looked around the room. You know, when you're a kid, you always want to make sure people like what you're saying. And because most of the kids were black, they all went like this. It was like I crossed the line in bringing this up. They're not allowed to bring it up. The kids I went to school with, when I went to get a job at 16, they couldn't get jobs where I could get a job. The world is messed up. It's really messed up when it comes to marriage, too. And so what has happened is, back away from just marriage, let's talk about sex. Now everyone thinks they're cool about sex. They get it, they understand it, and ask a person what's sex about, and they'll go, well, it's fun. Or they go, well, it's a way of expressing love. That's better. In fact, that is correct. But when it comes right down to it, sex as a standalone is not technically about expressing love biologically. And we have a biological body, and the biological body is driven by the drive to survive, self-preservation. We know that that's like the definition of life, is self-preservation. And so what happens is this drive to survive is all about the basics like air, water, food, shelter. And then what happens is it's got a subordinate drive to procreate. But it drives back to the principle of survival because in greater numbers, we have a better chance for survival individually, right? So what has happened has been because the world is so, oh yeah, no, I'm kind of spiritual, but I'm not religious. Everyone's afraid to talk about it. Everyone's afraid to identify themselves as someone who has faith in God, believes in God, and I'm not taking you down a religious path, but the truth of the matter is that we are spiritual, essentially. Our very nature, our core nature, not our biological nature and not the ego nature, but our core nature is we're a soul. the soul that we are, we have a body. You're not the body, right? You don't say, I'm the body. You might say, I'm a man, but you don't say, I'm the body. You're a man, but you're a soul first. And you have a body, and you have a mind. And that mind is kind of in between you and the body. So that mind is being told constantly, survival, 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 procreation, procreation, procreation. And then the sophisticated world that doesn't want to talk about God or anything spiritual has turned sex into a plaything. It's recreational. And so what happens is we pick that up because we are educated by television, by programs on the TV, by movies, by articles we read. It's all about sex, sex, sex. Women exposing their boobs, they're flaunting everything. And it's okay. They say it's okay. It isn't really okay. If we're human beings, then we should be focused on intimacy with our wife. Intimacy. But we're not. And so we use the term, we replace the term sex, which is what we want, because our body is driving us to want sex, and we call it intimacy, and we're not admitting, I just want sex. It's okay to want sex. Your wife, if she understood marriage the way we teach marriage at the Marriage Foundation, then she would understand that from her perspective, taking care of her husband's physical needs is a joyful event for her that expresses loyalty, primarily, because women are driven the way men are to have sex, and love. But they're not taught. So you're with a woman who's not taught this. Now I'm going to say, let's switch. What are all the things you're not taught that she has needs for? For instance, and I'm not going to get into all the explanation like I just did for sex, but she has a need for you to listen, to really pay attention to her, to sit down and allow her to open up. It's a need for a woman, like you have the need for sex. So the way we approach this at the Marriage Foundation, and it's a little bit difficult for you to just achieve what you want by doing this or doing that. It's a big picture kind of thing. There's a need on your part to shift your perspective of your wife, of your marriage, and of yourself. I've written a couple of books. It's in there. There's a course for men. It's in there. I actually recommend the course for you because if you're leading a sexless marriage right now, and when I say sexless, I mean, look, once a month or every 2 or 3 months or even every couple of weeks, that's not enough for a man, for most men. It really isn't. People always ask, well, what's enough? Well, when you really have your marriage properly functioning, when it's firing on all 8 cylinders, then you're not thinking in those terms, and you'll have plenty. And it'll be awesome. And every time it'll be awesome. And sometimes it'll even be recreational, but mostly it's not. But you see, you're not doing your part. You could say that. So I want you to understand there's 2 levels of this. One level, which is much deeper, is where you need to go. Because you're missing out on marriage. Even though you're married and you're satisfied just by having sex once in a while and a fairly okay relationship, it's like getting into a Maserati and just getting into the sound system. Because Maserati is about driving the car. It's a vehicle. Marriage is this vehicle that brings you to a really cool place, a state of consciousness that you almost can't achieve anywhere else in life, where you're really feeling happy all the time, where you're feeling love and loved all the time. That's the Maserati. That's marriage. That's what you're supposed to have. So that's the way to really approach it. I'm not going to say, oh, well, try this and try this. This will turn around. You got to use more foreplay, and you got to make sure you're clean, and you got to wine. I'm not going to go into that stuff. That's BS stuff. That's BS. We're not here for that. You know, I used to be a divorce mediator. I had a lucrative practice, and trust me, makes a lot more money than helping people with their marriages. But when I got into marriage from a perspective of common sense, you might say, and I started digging into it and I realized what marriage is, I said, screw the money. We're going to get into this, and we've compiled teachings that nobody else has. They're so awesome, and they save marriages all the time. Thousands of people take our courses, and they're very affordable, and they save their marriages, turn them into something splendid, because marriage is splendid. And that's why I started the foundation. It's really cool. I was going to set up practices for divorce mediation all over the country. I'm just that kind of guy who does things kind of big. But I got into this and I realized, okay, this is not going to get that big right away, because marriage is spiritual. People are not into that yet, but they're moving in that direction. Marriage is deep. And I'm going up against this whole marriage industry of not saving marriages. Because if you went to couples counseling, it's useless. Maybe you've already tried. If you go to personal therapy for your marriage, it's useless. Maybe you've already tried. Our stuff is totally useful right away. So look into it. So the thing with the intimacy, there's big picture, and that's where we come from at the Marriage Foundation. And then there's little manipulative tricks of the trade, you might say. Don't go there. Don't go there. You'll waste your life, because your life is meant to be happy. Do you know that? Do you realize that? We're not taught these things. You're a human being. Number one desire for a human being, because we're spiritual beings, is happiness. Off the charts, happiness. That's your number one requirement. And it's okay to have that requirement. You're not supposed to suffer. And you have free will. You know how much control you have? It's off the charts how much control you have. But you need to know how. You know, one of the elements for creating a happy marriage, and you'll never hear this anywhere else, is learning how to master your mind. Where else do you hear this? Why? Because the mind, if you're not mastering it, it is controlling you. The habits, the instincts, the compulsions, they're all controlling you. So you have to learn. And I have techniques for that. I've got techniques for everything. So anyway, I get off a little bit. I can't help that. I'm a conceptual thinker. But turn your marriage around, man. Turn it around. Don't settle. Don't settle. And don't put it on her. It's not her fault. You're not supposed to convince someone against their will. It doesn't work anyway. In fact, there's an old expression. I'm going to leave you with this thought, but I want you to subscribe. I want you to like this video. If you've been following, I want you to become a TMF marriage counselor, and I'm going to leave you with this saying. A woman convinced against her will is of the same opinion still. That goes for men too. God bless you. I'm glad you visited, and take care. Thanks.